Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Baker. We're going to continue going over my 6th unit in my biology class today. Today we're going to continue talking about how genetic differences between individuals and populations arise. This time we're also going to look at how immigration and immigration with an I and with an E affect the allelic frequencies of a population. Remember that immigration is going into a new place. Immigration with an E is coming from someplace into the population. All right, so first thing I want to do is go back and review something we talked about in Unit 3. It's been a little while since we've talked about it. Mutations. All right, mutations are specific changes in a DNA sequence that will affect the genetic information. For this unit, we're considering mutations that are going to have an effect on a phenotype. All right, and these can come about through some mutagens or some random mutations. We are mainly thinking about random mutations here. If it is due to a mutagen, a lot of times that would be part of an artificial selection, but not necessarily, right? And we might talk about that a little bit more in this unit. So remember this whole list of mutations, right? We are not concerned about the silent mutations that are not affecting changes to the phenotype. We are only concerned about the ones that do, all right? But it's a good idea to have some of these in your head as we move through this week in my biology class. So in general, the term for the change in allele frequencies due to random chance is called genetic drift. And it's going to have a bigger impact the smaller the population is, because each individual is going to have a higher weight in the population in that genetic average that we're thinking about here for a genome, right? So if, for example, you have like 10 frogs, 3 of them are dying, and a few of them are going to be changing based on random mutations in their genome, in their own DNA, and then mating with others. We only have 7 possible adults to actually choose from because 3 of them died. So if a few of them have those mutations and pass them on, then it's going to be a larger impact than if you, say, had 1,000 frogs and only like 40 of them died, and the rest, only a very specific few had those mutations, right? So in general, we're thinking about mainly affecting smaller populations, not very big populations. Very big populations are going to favor a stable genome that doesn't change much. You also generally only get larger populations when they already fit their own environment and they are able to live and find food and reproduce effectively in that environment. If that environment doesn't change, their population isn't going to change much. Neither will their genome. Right? One of the ways that those changes can happen is due to a catastrophe. Something big happens in the environment, shakes everything up. This can be the addition of a new predator. It can be the removal of a prey species so they can't find food as easily. Right? It could be a large earthquake that actually affects the environment itself, the landscape changes, right? And especially if this is a small population, because they're going to be relying more heavily on those things, all right? But this is a change in allele frequencies due to a catastrophe, all right? So we have a large population becoming a small population, and because of that, we have a loss of variation, right? If only one individual with a specific allele combination survives, their chances of passing that specific allele combination on to the next generation in the population, especially as the populations go onward, is going to be really low, especially if that allele frequency has something to do with recessive alleles, right? Because those recessive alleles are going to be outclassed by dominant alleles in the phenotypes. So as you can see, the kind of idea of a bottleneck, if you're pouring out through the bottle, only a few actual particles are going to make it out, and most of them are going to stay in the population. So we're going to get something called a surviving population in that third jar, right? And if these were individuals and they were mating and they were reproducing, we would see this change where there's a lot of this orangish colored ball here. There's not very many here because a lot of red, even though there were a few red here, a lot of red made it into the surviving population. All right. If this were an actual species that we were talking about, maybe those red individuals had a specific allele frequency combination or a trait that made them fit. That means they're able to find food and reproduce easily for the new status quo, that new environment they're living in, the new amount of prey to eat, or the new predator isn't able to find them as easily. All right. So that's a bottleneck effect. Something similar but different is the founder's effect, or founder effect. You will see it both ways. It just kind of depends on what you're looking at, right? And this is the change in allele frequencies due to migration. So if a small population leaves a larger population and goes to a new place, then that population starts reproducing on their own. We're going to see that same loss of variation that we saw with the bottleneck effect, but it's not due to some catastrophic event. It's just due to part of the population leaving, right? And if that small population leaves but doesn't bring enough individuals to ensure a large variation in their traits, we're only going to see the traits of that small population passed on to their next generation and the generation after that. Right? We're going to look at some very specific examples this week in my class. One of them, besides this picture of rabbits, is the idea of the Amish. Here in Ohio, we have a large Amish community. The original Amish settlers to northern Ohio had a trait for 6 fingers, and as they passed down their generation, more of those individuals inside the Amish population, because they generally will mate only with other Amish people, that trait, it shows a larger percentage in an Amish population than in the larger Ohio population, right? I'm not saying all Amish people have 6 fingers. I'm saying that more people in the Amish population have 6 fingers than those people in the Ohio population that have 6 fingers. So those percentages are different. The allele frequencies are different. All right, so we've talked about a few of the reasons that allelic frequencies will change, and we looked at specifically with the founder effect how immigration or immigration with an I and an E respectively affect the allelic frequencies of a population. We're going to continue talking about and asking about how genetic differences arise. We're mainly talking about mutations in individuals that allow them to reproduce more, either because they can find food more, they avoid being food more often, or they're able to attract a mate more easily than the other individuals in their population. Remember, individuals will mutate and change, but they are not evolving. The overall concept or the overall genome changing, that's the evolution we're talking about here, all right? As always, remember, keep asking questions, keep learning. Have a good one.